The message came like thunder behind the ribs, not in sound but in knowing. It was the kind of silence that shakes the air before a storm. God says declares, 20 seconds left. The words did not travel through ears. They bloomed inside the marrow, electric, certain, and heavy as truth itself. I froze. The seconds felt alive, each one a heartbeat echoing through eternity. I saw her. A woman. Not stranger, not enemy, but someone near enough that her breath once brushed against mine in laughter. She was walking through a hall of marble and echo, into a courtroom not built of law but of consequence. In her hands, papers that glowed and trembled, pages that could unwrite a name. My name. Heaven whispered again, she carries something dangerous, but not to destroy you, only to test the truth of what you've become. I wanted to move, to stop her, to shout, but the air held me still, like the weight of divine instruction. 20 seconds stretched into an ocean of thought. What if those papers were not ink and accusation, but mirrors, reflections of all I refused to admit? The courtroom rose inside my mind, not of earthly justice but of spiritual accounting. The benches were filled with the unseen, voices of memory, of ancestors, of every version of me that had once walked away from purpose. The judge was not a man in robes. The judge was light, too bright to describe. And yet unbearably gentle. The woman stepped forward, trembling but determined. I saw the papers flutter, and in the trembling pages, I recognized the stories I had written with my own fear, times I had silenced my own voice, times I let truth rot under comfort, times I chose safety instead of calling. Each page was a record not of crime, but of neglect. The neglect of destiny. Heaven says, open this immediately, so I did, not with hands, but with heart. The papers opened themselves before me, and every line sang with memory. He failed to believe when faith was demanded, he hid when courage called, he doubted when miracles waited, he chose silence when the world was burning. Each line hurt, not as punishment but as unveiling. And yet as I read, something shifted. The voice of the woman began to merge with another sound, the voice of grace. She speaks, said the light, but listen deeper. Her voice is not to condemn but to awaken. The woman's lips moved, and her voice came through the air like wind over water. You built your walls of reason and called them protection. You stored your fear in jars and called them wisdom. You avoided the fire and lost your warmth. You measured your worth in others' eyes and forgot your own reflection. You thought the world would save you by praising you. But heaven has never needed applause, it needs obedience. The words did not strike, they healed. They cut only what was false. I fell to my knees, and the marble beneath me turned to river, running light, washing over my mistakes. I could feel the papers dissolving, ink fading, each accusation rewritten in mercy. You are not being erased, said the light. You are being rewritten. The woman's eyes filled with tears, not of triumph but of release. She had carried the burden because I had refused to. She was not enemy, not traitor, but messenger. Every person who ever held truth in trembling hands, afraid to speak it yet unable to stay silent, heaven thundered again, softer this time, like thunder heard from the other side of clouds, when God warns. It is not to destroy, it is to prepare. When heaven says open, it is not for curiosity, it is for transformation. The courtroom melted. The walls fell away, replaced by sky, endless and breathing. The judge's light filled everything, yet somehow it did not blind, it revealed. I saw my own soul as though it were a page rewritten by divine ink, every scar turned into script, every wound a window, and in that vision, I understood, the 20 seconds were never about time, they were about awareness. 20 seconds to wake, to choose, to believe again before the moment passes. Every second is such a trial, every breath such a courtroom. The woman still stands beside you in many forms. She is conscience, intuition, warning, truth. She is the quiet voice that says stop when the world shouts go. And the papers she holds, they are every choice waiting for signature. I reached for her hand. She looked at me and smiled, not a human smile, but a reflection of heaven's forgiveness. Your name cannot be erased, she said, only forgotten by yourself. Remember it, and nothing written against you will stand. Light flooded through everything, dissolving courtroom, marble, and fear. I woke, not from sleep, but from unawareness. The air smelled like renewal. Somewhere in the distance, a clock began again, its ticking no longer threat but promise. The message had come. The warning had passed. The lesson remained. Truth is the safest place to stand when the storm arrives. Faith is the only defense that needs no weapon, and destiny waits only for the brave to remember who they are. The silence after revelation is not empty, it hums. It is the hum of the universe when it exhales, the stillness after thunder, the sound of the soul adjusting to new light. I stood there, suspended between what was and what could be, and in that delicate space, I heard the echo of heaven's whisper again, "You are not done yet." The air shimmered, as though unseen wings stirred it. The woman was still beside me, now dressed not in shadow but in luminescence that moved like morning through fog. Her papers were gone. In her hands now rested a flame, small yet steady. She extended it toward me. "This is what remains after the trial," she said. "It is the light that was always within you, waiting for the weight to lift." I hesitated. What if I drop it? "You will," she smiled. "Everyone does. But fire never blames the hand that trembles, it only waits to be lifted again." The flame leapt softly into my palm. It did not burn, it breathed. I felt warmth rise through my veins, a living pulse of purpose. It was memory rediscovered, the first time I ever believed in something greater than myself, the first time I chose right over easy, the first time I felt small yet infinite in the same breath. Heaven spoke again, "Hold this light when the courtroom returns." I wanted to ask when it would, but before the thought could form, the world shifted. The sky around me began to ripple, and I stood once again before doors of judgment, not marble this time, but iron, ancient and rusted. The air smelled of regret. The woman stood beside me, flame still in her hand. "Every soul walks through these doors," she said. "Not once, but often. Every time you face your own reflection, you stand before this court. And each time, the verdict is not spoken by God, it is chosen by you." She pushed the doors open. Inside was not the grand hall of before, but a smaller chamber, dark, close, echoing with voices that felt like mine but twisted, bitter. They argued, accusing, defending, reasoning. One voice shouted, "He failed." Another whispered, "He tried." Another cried, "He will never change." And still another, softer but unwavering, said, "He can." The woman placed the flame in the center of the room. The shadows retreated instantly, as though ashamed of their own existence. I saw them now, each voice had a form. They were versions of me, one fearful, one proud, one weary, one faithful. All of them fragments of a single soul, gathered to vote on who I would become next. Heaven's voice rolled through the chamber, "This is the real trial. No gavel will sound. No witness will save you. Only truth will." The fearful one stepped forward, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "If you choose faith," he hissed, "you will lose control. You'll trust too much. You'll risk everything." The proud one scoffed. "Faith is for the weak. Build yourself, protect yourself, prove yourself." The weary one sighed. "Why try again? You've already failed enough times. You know how this ends." But then, the fourth, faithful, quiet, patient, walked to the flame and lifted it gently. "Maybe failure was never the end," he said. "Maybe it was the invitation." The others fell silent. The woman looked at me, her eyes like windows into eternity. "Which voice will you feed?" I wanted to choose the faithful one. I wanted to shout it. But my throat closed. Fear and pride wrestled inside like old serpents. The flame flickered. I could feel the courtroom leaning, waiting for my answer, not just heaven, but every unseen force that had ever rooted for me to rise. And then it came, not a voice, but a knowing. Every destiny demands surrender before victory. I stepped forward, knees weak but will steady, and said, "I choose the one who still believes." The flame roared, golden and wide, filling the chamber with light. The fearful version of me dissolved like smoke. The proud one bowed his head and faded into humility. The weary one found rest in warmth. Only the faithful one remained, and in that merging, I became whole. The woman's voice trembled with joy. So it is written again. A name restored. A heart awakened. I felt my chest burn, not with pain but with recognition. The flame had entered me. My pulse beat with something larger than life itself. Heaven's voice filled the air. Every soul must hold court with itself before it can stand before the world. You cannot carry divine fire with unhealed hands. But once you believe, no paper, no voice, no power can erase the name heaven wrote. The room disappeared. I was standing in light once more, the kind that feels like beginning. The woman turned toward the horizon, where dawn was rising, a new day, yet not of earth, but of the spirit. This warning was never about fear, she said softly. It was a clock counting down to awakening. Heaven gives deadlines not to threaten, but to awaken the sleeping before the dream becomes regret. She began to fade, her form becoming translucent, her voice echoing like wind through strings. Remember, the courtroom is within. The flame is within. And when the world accuses you, answer with the light. I reached out, but my hand passed through air. She was gone, only the flame remained, steady inside my chest, whispering as it pulsed. Faith is not belief without proof, it is trust without hesitation. And so I walked forward, out of the unseen, into the world again, no longer afraid of the seconds ticking away, for I knew now, when God counts down, He is not ending something. He is beginning it. When I stepped out of the light, the world had not changed, yet everything was different. The same streets, the same sky, the same faces. But I saw them now through a veil that had been lifted. The noise of the city no longer sounded like chaos, it was rhythm, heartbeat, movement, every horn, every shout, every footstep a reminder that life was still writing itself in real time. I carried the flame inside me. Not metaphorically, I could feel it. It pulsed behind my ribs, alive, waiting for use. The warning still echoed somewhere in my bones. A woman close to you carries something dangerous into a courtroom. I understood now that it was not about law or vengeance or betrayal, it was about truth coming to be witnessed. The courtroom was any moment when honesty stood before fear. The woman was any soul chosen to speak truth even when trembling. The next morning I met her. Not the shining figure from the vision, but her reflection walking in human form, a friend, a voice I had once ignored. She looked tired, carrying a folder under her arm. Her eyes avoided mine. "Can we talk?" She asked quietly. I nodded. We sat beneath a fig tree where the air smelled of early rain. She opened the folder and took out a few worn pages, real papers this time, not glowing, not divine, but heavy with meaning. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this," she said. "But something told me I must." Her hands shook slightly. I could see fear hiding behind courage. She slid the papers toward me. They were letters, old, forgotten, written by me in another season of my life. Words I had sent in anger, in pride, in ignorance. Words that had hurt. She had kept them, not to use them, but because she had never been able to forget them. I needed you to see what your silence did, she said. Her voice didn't accuse. It pleaded. I needed you to remember who you used to be so that I could finally forgive you. And there it was again, the courtroom. Not in vision now, but alive, breathing between two souls who had avoided the trial for too long. I felt the flame tremble inside me, reminding me, hold it steady. Speak from light. So I spoke, not to defend, not to excuse. I was blind. I said. Blind and afraid of my own mistakes. I thought pretending they weren't there would erase them. But it only erased parts of me. She nodded, tears glinting in her lashes. I didn't come to accuse you. I came because I saw something in a dream last night. A voice said, "He is ready to hear." Her words pierced through the veil of coincidence. Heaven had orchestrated this meeting, not for judgment but for release. The dangerous papers were no longer threats, they were keys. I reached for them. As my fingers touched the edge, the letters shimmered faintly, as if responding to the light in me. The words on the page seemed to loosen, their weight lifting like smoke. The pain that had been sealed inside them dissolved into understanding. She exhaled deeply, as though the act of showing them had freed her too. This is why the warning came, I realized aloud. It wasn't about her destroying me, it was about truth freeing both of us. The woman smiled faintly. Maybe heaven never sends enemies, only mirrors. Her words settled into me like prophecy. All around us, the day began to shift, the wind stirring, light bending through leaves, birds changing direction mid-flight. It was as if the world approved, as if the universe had been waiting for this small act of courage to balance something unseen. We sat in silence. Not awkward, but sacred. After a while, she said, "You know, the courtroom isn't just for trials. It's also where verdicts of freedom are declared." I nodded. And sometimes we're both the accused and the judge. She stood, brushed the dust from her hands, and looked toward the horizon. Whatever this was, I think it's done now. I smiled, but I knew better. Nothing divine ever truly ends, it transforms. As she walked away, the air shimmered briefly, and for a split second, I saw the faint glow of wings behind her, just like in the vision. She was human again in the next blink, but the reminder lingered. I turned toward the sky, whispered, "What now?" And heaven answered, not in words this time, but through feeling. A pull, gentle and unmistakable, drawing me forward. I understood, every warning from above is an assignment, every miracle a message waiting to be carried into action. So I began to walk, flame steady in my chest, toward wherever truth would lead next. The road ahead was quiet, but it pulsed with meaning. Every step felt guided, as if the ground itself recognized the rhythm of faith returning to the feet that once hesitated. The air shimmered with a presence I could not name but could feel, gentle, patient, eternal. I walked without destination, and yet every direction seemed correct. The flame inside my chest was my compass. It beat in sync with the heartbeat of something far greater than myself. Heaven was not above anymore, it was within. Whispering through intuition, shaping thought into purpose, a voice stirred again, not thunder this time, but calm authority, like sunlight speaking through leaves. The warning has passed. The preparation begins. I stopped beneath a half-fallen archway where ivy and ruin intertwined. The stones glowed faintly, as if they remembered something sacred. The voice continued, steady as truth itself. The courtroom taught you reflection. Now comes rebuilding. You have seen what can be erased, now learn what cannot be broken. And in that moment, I understood, every divine warning is only half the message. The other half is rebirth. I knelt beside the stones. My hands traced the carvings there, symbols worn by time but still breathing with meaning. Circles within circles, flames within hearts, eyes within tears. It was language without letters, yet my soul could read it. It said, to rebuild, you must remember what you came here to do. Wind rose suddenly, swirling dust and light together into shape. From it, figures appeared, ordinary people, yet each carried a faint glow of eternity. Some held tools, others scrolls, others nothing at all but the look of quiet understanding. They surrounded me in silence until one spoke, an older man with eyes like horizon. We are the builders of unseen things. You have been summoned to join us. What do you build? I asked. Bridges, he said simply. Between what people fear and what they dream. He handed me a chisel made of light. Every word you speak in truth becomes a stone that does not crumble. Every act of compassion lays another path for those still afraid to cross. The woman from before appeared once more, no longer carrying papers or flame, only calm. This is the next part of your calling, she said. To become what you once awaited. To be the voice that warns, but also the one that restores. Her eyes softened. Remember, heaven doesn't need more judges. It needs builders. The word struck deeper than any sermon. I felt something inside me unfold. Like wings remembering how to move, I began to see visions of people I knew, faces blurred by time, strangers and friends alike. Some carried burdens, others wore masks of composure hiding quiet despair. The flame within me responded, urging me toward them, not to preach, but to listen, to reflect their own light back to them until they remembered it. That was the new courtroom. Every encounter, every conversation, every act of kindness or forgiveness. Each moment was a trial between fear and faith, and every choice a verdict of love or avoidance. The man with the horizon eyes placed his hand on my shoulder. Do not wait for miracles to arrive wrapped in thunder. Most come disguised as opportunities to be kind when you have no reason to be. The figures began to fade, dissolving back into the wind that carried them. Their voices lingered like a hymn: build, believe, begin again. I looked at the chisel in my hand. It flickered, then melted into my skin, becoming part of me. My words, my thoughts, my actions, each now carried the power to carve light into the world. As the last trace of vision vanished, I found myself standing by a river. The water moved slow and clear, carrying reflections of the sky like memories drifting home. I knelt and touched the surface. The ripples answered, forming faint words that glowed before fading. Truth does not shout, it endures. A deep calm filled me. The flame inside had grown steadier, less wild now, more like an old friend. I knew there would be more trials, more warnings, more moments when heaven would whisper before the storm. But I also knew that I no longer needed to fear them. Every divine countdown is an invitation to rise sooner. Every warning is mercy disguised as urgency. The woman's final words echoed faintly across the water: carry the light where the silence still reigns. When you walk into a courtroom of doubt, whether your own or another's, let your presence remind them that grace still wins. And then the wind changed again, smelling of rain, of soil, of renewal. I lifted my eyes to the horizon and walked on, heart alive, flame unwavering, the world ahead not smaller or larger, but clearer. For once, I wasn't searching for signs, I was living as one. The river kept whispering as I walked beside it, and every ripple seemed to speak the same word: continue, not hurry, not prove, not repent forever, simply continue. The flame in my chest no longer flared, it glowed, patient as sunrise. I began to notice the small things, the way light rested on the faces of strangers, the way laughter carried across distance like forgiveness learning to breathe again. Each sound, each glance, felt like a message from the same voice that had once thundered. Heaven, it seemed, had changed its volume. One afternoon I found an old courthouse, long abandoned, ivy climbing its walls. Something in me wanted to step inside, so I did. The air smelled of dust and endings. Benches cracked, ceiling half fallen, yet sunlight slipped through the holes in the roof, laying golden stripes across the floor. It felt like standing inside a memory of judgment that had turned into mercy. I walked to where the judge's chair once stood and sat there, not to rule, but to remember. The silence around me was thick with echoes of choices long made. And then I understood why heaven had spoken of courtrooms. They were never places of punishment. They were mirrors of conscience. Every soul must walk into one until truth becomes habit. I closed my eyes and spoke aloud, though no one was there. I forgive myself for being late to my own calling. The words startled me. They did not feel rehearsed. But as soon as I said them, the air shifted. The dust rose, caught in sunlight, shimmering like countless small souls released. Forgiveness had always been the true verdict. I stood again and faced the door. Outside, the world moved in the quiet rhythm of a normal day, children shouting, vendors calling, wind rearranging leaves. Yet beneath it, I could sense the same pulse that had filled the visions, eternity woven into ordinary time. A woman passed me on the street, carrying a bundle of papers pressed to her chest. She looked hurried, afraid she might be late for something important. For an instant our eyes met, and I felt the faint recognition of heaven's pattern repeating itself. She was another messenger, another heart balancing fear and purpose. I smiled and said, "You're right on time." She blinked, confused, then smiled back and hurried on. I didn't need to know what papers she carried. It was enough to know she would reach her own courtroom, her own moment of awakening. The lesson settled fully now. Warnings are never the end, they are invitations to listen more deeply. The countdowns heaven gives are not threats but alarms to wake the sleeping courage within us. As dusk approached, I reached the edge of the city. The sun leaned low, turning everything to copper and fire. I stopped and looked back once, not to mourn, but to thank. Every shadow I had feared had been part of the light's design. Every test had been a rehearsal for faith. The voice that had once shouted now spoke softly within, "Go, and be the voice that steadies others when their seconds run low. Speak not of doom, but of renewal. Tell them the courtroom is not where they are condemned, it is where they remember their name." I nodded. The road ahead glimmered like an unwritten page, and I walked, lighter, clearer, carrying nothing but the small flame of faith, which had by then become indistinguishable from my own heartbeat. Night folded over the horizon like the closing of a vast book. The river of light that had carried my footsteps thinned to a silver thread, leading into darkness. I followed it without fear. The flame in my chest burned steady, a lantern for whatever worlds waited beyond sight. The stars came out one by one, witnesses, not judges. Each shone as if whispering, "You are still written." Wind moved through the trees like the breath of unseen choirs. Somewhere above, the same voice that had once thundered now murmured, "All revelation ends in peace." I walked until the earth itself seemed to disappear beneath my feet and I stood on nothing but radiance. There the woman appeared again, no longer separate from the light. Her eyes carried both dawn and dusk. "Do you understand now?" she asked. "I think so," I said. The warning was mercy. The danger was forgetting. She smiled. Every soul is given moments that sound like endings but are only awakenings. You heard the countdown and thought it was death. It was only the sound of time clearing space for truth. Her form began to scatter into light dust, yet her voice grew stronger. "When you return to the world, speak gently. The divine is not loud, it listens. The holy is not distant, it hides in ordinary breath. Carry that knowing. The flame inside me answered her, rising until it filled the air around us. The sky broke open, not with thunder but with a deep hush, as if all creation paused to hear the final line of a long-forgotten song. I lifted my hands. The light that had once been warning now streamed through my fingers, becoming rivers across the sky. Where it touched shadow, new things began to grow, small, green, alive. Then came the last whisper, the one I will hear again whenever doubt returns. There is no erasure in love, only rewriting. There is no final verdict in faith, only beginning again. The world spun slowly back into form, trees, wind, footsteps on soil. The night no longer felt like darkness, it felt like depth, and so I walked on, carrying the quiet fire of remembrance, knowing that whenever the heavens declare another warning, it will not be to end me but to call me once more into the endless work of becoming light.